what is your evolution of race consciousness?
Oh, yeah, and that's such an interesting question. I've been kind of ever since you brought it up a couple weeks ago, I've been thinking about it, and it's do you want to approach it? I think I just want to go at it chronologically and just like from my life. I grew up in a a small rural area in northern Wisconsin, and we had a graduating class of 106 people, and all white community. And it's one of those things where at the time though flags were going off and in your poem I was watching that video today and I thought it was wonderful and you in your poem you mentioned the third verse of the Star Spangled Banner. Then I did an article about that too not too long ago where these things kind of start drifted in and you see that there's things that are just not right. And so one of the first instances where I realized things were not quite right, when I was growing up, there was an issue in Wisconsin with spearfishing with treaty rights for the American Indians, and our school actually did. It's like it was in the treaty. They reserved the right to, um, based on the on what was established in the treaty, they reserved the right to practice their traditional hunting and various other parts of their life. Well, the population just was freaking out, in Wisconsin. And it's not something that people talk about much. I tried to revisit this for the local paper. The local paper did not want to talk, like they just want to pretend this never happened. But I remember being in class, and I remember the teachers themselves were organizing these protests, to go, and they were getting very hostile, and it was, when you're a little kid, you're sitting in a classroom and you're confronted with, well, I can be quiet, or I could speak out and draw hostility onto myself. And I think, as you're growing up, there's you pass through stages. I mean, you're a little kid, you're trying to figure out the world and your place in it. So I don't think, because sometimes I've been a little upset with myself for not coming to a racial awareness a little bit earlier, but then I think there has to be, I think it's also important to kind of sketch out what we can reasonably expect from people. So you're just kind of, you're trying to survive too. But I remember sitting in a class and the teacher was organizing this protest and the teacher was saying all these things that I thought were wrong. And I wasn't thinking about it in terms of racism because I was one of the few kids who actually read the assignments, and it said it said the Ojibwe had reserved the rights to go and spearfish. So I brought that up. I raised my hand. I'm like, wait, says in the book that they have that right. So this, it doesn't seem like there should be a conflict. And just, the hatred that I endured from that teacher and from the class, and, it's like, okay, you got to slowly step away and kind of regroup, refortify yourself and go back out at it again. So, I mean, those protests, and it was entirely violence on in the white communities directed against the Ojibwe and other tribes in the state of Wisconsin. It was entirely inappropriate. But there's and one of the other things I noticed growing up is there was a reservation nearby. So the reservation had its schools. And every now and then we'd get a kid from the reservation who'd come to our school. And I'd get to know him and it'd be like, hey, I think it was interesting. But without fail, within a couple weeks, they would always leave. And it's just piecing it together. I realized it's like those kids must have endured these pressures, that I wasn't aware of because they got them out of there again. And it's just like, and it just occurred to me that I had the realization. It's like I grew up and it was in a segregated school, they'd separated the groups. And it's just from there, I went to college and I just had growing frustration. I was a lot of things though. And I wonder how much, just the viewpoint of the United States, because there's some hostility. There's so much hostility as part of our national ideology. And I remember I got fed up and I left. I left the country when I was 26 and I moved to Peru. So I lived in Peru for about 10 years. And I think that's when I really started. There's some things that are going on that you're not consciously aware of. So I think a lot of my my journey to racial awakening is just this trying to figure out these things. You have an involuntary response to things. Your body keeps you alive, in cases your body senses danger. There's moments where, your body, this happens in all kinds of things in your life. Like, if you're grinding your teeth at night, or, something's going on in your life that's bothering you, that pressure's got to come out. You might not consciously be aware what it is. So like that time in my life where I decided, okay, I'm out of here. I was down to a backpack of possessions. I left the country with no plan really. It was just kind of a desperate move. So I'm in South America, and this is the first time where, okay, now race is obvious because I'm, the only white person on the streets. And it was just stunning because I went through a period where I was so accepted, the people there were so, and I didn't anticipate that they would embrace me and adopt me. And that's when I realized it's like I was imposing on them my expectation of how I thought people would be treated in the United States. So then you just have to have there's sequence of just kind of awakenings and moments where you just kind of see this thread of stuff that's not talked about, but it's influencing everything, is always there. And then more recently, because I got married in 2009, and my wife and I moved back from Peru. It was it's kind of comical now, but it's that there was an election coming up in Peru, and we were not uh we were concerned about one of the candidates who had a lot of so it seems like everywhere I go, I'm in elections where I'm concerned about one of the candidates and planning an exit strategy. But we thought at that time, it's like, well, let's get you your U.S. passport. We don't necessarily have to stay in the United States. We can go anywhere. Travel is more open with a U.S. passport. But I went through the whole process. So then I went through the interview process and the getting the visa process. Even having done everything right, we're on the plane, and I just felt this just anxiety. And I hadn't quite come to that realization, and of what we were going to face, but part of me kind of knew. And then just in these we've been here 15 years now. And so just watching some of the things that my wife has had to endure, and it's, there's good people mixed in with the bad people, but there are just some things that happen that are unacceptable. And over the last 4 or 5 years, I've been doing a lot of writing on Medium, and it just kind of expands because it started with the treatment my wife got. One of the first articles that I wrote, I've always been a writer long for even in Peru. I was editor for a magazine and things like that. But um, in 2009, I wrote an article about, it's titled "Speaking Spanish in America," and it was my family and I always speak Spanish. And at the beginning of Trump's first campaign, when he was running to get the Republican nomination, people would come up to my kids who were, 6 at the time, 4, 5, 6, and tell them it's like, this is America. We speak English here. And it's, I wrote this article and I sent it. It was just a letter to the editor, and it became the most read article for that newspaper ever. But even so, I wrote a follow-up article 2 weeks later, and the newspaper didn't want to publish the follow-up, which doesn't make sense to me. It's just like one of my friends who's in, and it's like you're, and what you expressed so well in your poem, I was perplexed. It's like everybody says newspapers, they're struggling. They're trying to make money. They need readers. One of my friends who's an SEO guy said the fact that your article got shared so many times, it got shared, I think, 250,000 times. He said, you all by yourself with that article increased the standing of that newspaper's presence on the web. Why would they not want to a week later publish a follow-up article from the same writer? So then just from there, and then over the last 4 years 4 or 5 years has been my work on Medium with similar articles to that, meeting wonderful editors, kind of exploring different things that happen and expanding it. So I mean, I kind of started. Once you're in the viewpoint of racism directed at immigrants, then you just kind of just start seeing all the other, it's all kind of connected. And like, I think it's just kind of getting to the point where it seems like racism is the thread that connects basically all human evil. There's all these different off ramps and on ramps, but racism is always right down the center. And I think through the evolution of looking at that thing, you start to uncover all of the things that don't make sense in the United States start to make sense when you start exploring it. I mean, I was reading W.B. Du Bois, The Reconstruction of Black America, and it's just lines thing up. It's just one of the every so often. I mean, when you're 10, right, and you don't have any experience with the world, somebody will tell you something that's clearly not true, and you'll something will go like this. And then there's other points in your life when you read something, it's like, well, and it just makes perfect sense. So that's kind of, I guess maybe that's the, so it's just, it's an ongoing process. I think it's a forever process is what I'm kind of starting to discover now, which is okay. It's the work we have to do. And, yeah, I guess that's kind of the short story. Maybe I'll let you, I babbled enough. Maybe I'll let you give me a response.
Well, thank you so much, Walter, for sharing all that, brother. I appreciate you going through all of that. And yeah, it is a forever process, isn't it? And that can be one of the toughest parts for people to deal with is the fact that you have to continually educate yourself. There's all of these logical inconsistencies like you were talking about before. So it can be a difficult experiencing cognitive dissonance over and over and over and over and over again. It's exhausting. And yeah. And then to go through that exhausting process, right? Just to realize that you have to keep going through it, it can be a little bit daunting. And on the other side of that is, well, you could technically choose to be willfully ignorant of all of that. And it's a lot
Yeah.
easier to do that. And it's a lot less work. And so it's just, it is an uphill battle making sure that I'm promoting I'm promoting anti-racism, because I am trying to promote something that is going to be difficult for people, is going to cause some internal strife, and some mental strain. But I think that what you were kind of expressing and what I'm going to express right now is that having that understanding, it really makes the world a lot more clear. It really makes things that's going on around you a little more understandable, even if that understanding breeds a little bit of difficulty with the world around you, right? And understanding what your place in it is and what that means for you in terms of the actions that you're going to take, right? Thanks for watching. For access to the full-length conversation and all of the 2-hour-long unedited conversations that I've had on race, click the support link in the description below. Thanks for your support and see you next time.